Hello everyone, Lawrence here. Welcome to the Ride With Me channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about my Canyon Neuron 7.0, and actually that is a totally misleading title because it's actually a Nerve 6.0 which has been rebranded into a Neuron 7.0, but almost everything is identical. The dimensions, the geometry, everything is the same. So let's get started. So as I said, nearly everything is the same except for this little guy right here. This is an SLX shifter on the Nerve 6.0. It has been downgraded into a DRA on the Neuron 7.0. So that's the only difference between the two bikes. I guess not really a difference, but the Neuron now has like stickers everywhere and it's got colors. This is just a completely murdered out stealth look, which I really like. I found that there was very little information about what components are on the bike. So you get these Mavic Crossride FTS 650B wheels. On there are Continental Mountain King 2.0s. Again, identical with the Neuron. I don't really like the tires on loose stuff because it feels like the front is just constantly jumping around. There are other reasons that I'll come to later, but I don't really like the tires. They're quite good if it gets like slightly muddier, but not sticky mud, so just, you know, that the knobs start gripping. That's the important thing with these tires. Not a huge fan of them. Moving to the other side of the wheel, these are 180mm 6-bolt discs. These are just quick release axles, so no bolt throughs. The suspension on this bike is complete rock socks. You get a Reba RL front suspension. You don't get Kashima coating or any of that sort of fancy stuff. So basically you get your air cartridge on this side, you get the compression lock on the right side, and then on the left side right here, that's where your rebound dampening is. It's 120mm of travel. It's very nicely indicated, so if you want to set your sag, that is super easy to do. As you can see on this shot, it is a tapered frame, so you can go with really expensive suspension in the future if you want to. As you can see right here, standover clearance is huge. There is a bit of a triangle going on here to give some strength to it, but I have to say the seat post is like, that's about 25 centimeters from here to here. So you can put basically any dropper in there if, you know, it can fit in below. Sadly, it doesn't come with a dropper seat post, so that will be my first upgrade. The seat post right here has no setback, and it's quite limiting in terms of how far forward or backwards you can put the saddle. Saddle itself, very lightweight, but it's also super hard, so your butt will need some training to really, you know, learn to live with the saddle. Moving to the drivetrain, as you can see, I have the Egg Beater 3 pedals, which I reviewed. If you click the card in the top right corner, you can go to that review. Really like these pedals. So it's a hollow DRA crank, 2-piece crank. I like it, but of course I'm rubbing it, so it's now an ERA by Mano instead of a Shimano DRA, whatever. SLX shifter on this model. Now for the Neuron, it's only a DRA shifter, so I'm not too sure why they did that. The shock here is a RockShox Monarch RL. You have a climbing mode. If you put it here, you have full lock if you go down, and then it's open if you set it horizontally. Behind that you have your compression click. Now I have to say I went like 3 clicks softer on the, well, slower on the rear dampening, 2 clicks slower on the front dampening to fix that front wheel just jumping around all the time, as I said before. Air shocks front and rear, of course, your air valve goes on here. Linkage is bearing, not sleeve based, so bushing based, so really like that. 120 mils of travel in the rear and in the front. I like that. It's quite a good shock for the price point, really. I don't really understand how they could put all that sort of gear into the bike at the price I paid. Now I know for the Neuron model it is slightly more expensive, the 7.0, so you have to make your own decision on whether or not you think it's worth it. Now the drivetrain, again, it's the 3x setup. I really like it, but the most important thing here is their anti-squat geometry. Now I come from riding hardtails because I'm a cross-country rider. Why do I go with a Nerve or a Neuron with 120mm of travel? Mostly to save my back, also because I like to hit jumps every now and then, but mostly to save my back. Now I have quite a lot of air, so slightly more than my own weight in PSI in here. It's quite a harsh setup for me. But I still find, at first at least, I found that, you know, riding with rear suspension is like having a puncture in the rear. After a short while, the anti-squat suspension and your legs start cooperating again, and your pedaling will just improve to make sure that there's not really squat going on. It's quite efficient to the point where even from a guy coming from a hardtail, I now ride with the suspension completely open all the time. In the rear you get a Shimano XT shifter. There's no clutch in here. I would like to see a clutch in there. I even take an SLX shifter with a clutch over an XT without a clutch for the type of riding I do. So it is a 10-speed cassette. It's a 11 to E8. So you get very even steps in between. Cassette is good. Chain is a KMC chain. It's not the best chain, but whatever, it works for now. You also again get these cross-ride rims and hubs. Now as you can see, the rear here has the brake adapter built in, so again 180mm brake. It also has quite possibly the most annoying quick release bolt through combo ever. So as you can see, there is metal all around here, and this is basically just a quick release. So you have to completely unscrew it on this side, then you pull it out, and then it's still quite hard to get the wheel out. So I'm not at all a fan of this rear mechanism to keep the wheel in. It's in when it's in there, but it makes it super hard to make sure you don't have brake rub, and it's also not a quick release because it takes forever to get the wheel out. On this other side I actually already ruined the little spring that was in there, and because that other side thing, the nut on there does not come out. So not at all a fan of these. Either put a decent quick release in or put a decent true axle in, but this is just rubbish. So now that we are on this side of the bike, I also wanted to show this asymmetrical design. So this is above the pedaling axle, and then this thing is actually more or less in line with the bottom bracket. So you get an asymmetrical design. This is also what helps you with the anti-squat, which in my opinion works decent, but it's not quite perfect. Also, if you look slightly higher, there's a little hole here. So if you want to run a dropper post, you can run a stealth model. So that's great because this is like a super stealthy bike. So now back to things I don't like. So this is all plastic now. Normally you get like proper aluminium welded on thingies. They do give you some spares, but this is just plastic. So this is where you'll route your dropper. Now again, you can only put 2 cables in here. So if you want to run a remote lockout for your suspension and the dropper and the front shifter, then you're out of luck because you only can fit 2 cables. Now one of them is already routed internally. If you look slightly lower, this is where the front derailleur cable comes out. Also you can only run 1 bottle cage. Now for me personally, not a problem because I don't mind riding with a bag, but for people who don't or who want to put like a tool cage on here, only 1. So guys, now about the actual riding experience. What do I think about it? I like it. It is very short in reach. What that means is that for me personally, I actually have to really try to put a lot of weight on that front tire to get it to stick. It also means I can run the front suspension a lot softer than you usually would. I can run front tire pressures lower than I usually would, but I still have to make sure I put all that weight on that front tire to not have it go from underneath me. Now that has already resulted in 2 near crashes. How many crashes I would have had with my previous bike, I don't know, probably even more, because it is quite stable, this bike. It's short though, so you really have to work for it. It's not the most stable bike ever. It's also quite light at like 12.8 kilograms, so it jumps around a little bit, and you, as a rider, you really have to make sure that you keep that front wheel planted. The rear wheel though, super massive amounts of traction on there. Wheel spin, not much of an issue. I also don't really find that the front wheel lifting up is an issue because I'm used to, you know, really leaning forward by now. So the geometry on the bike, it's short for a modern bike, but it's actually quite okay. It is pretty fun to jump around. It's difficult to really like dive the nose back in if you're hitting doubles and tabletop stuff like that, but it's good. So if I were to give it a score, which I usually don't do in my reviews, I'd rate it like an 8.5 because value for money is great, but if they really wanted to get that 9 or 9.5, they just have to add like 2 centimeters of tube here and here, and they'd be done with it. So guys, if you like this video, there's a like button. Of course, you can comment, ask me questions. I'll try to reply to each and every one of them, unless if they're like completely rubbish, of course. And yeah, subscribe to Ride With Me. I'll put new videos on here. I'll also update it with a video about my customer experience with Canyon, because that's an interesting story as well. For now though, thank you very much for watching. You guys will see me in the next one.